Okay. So this morning, we're going to, this is the ultimate talk on Hongzhi's Guidepost of Silent Illumination. I'm going to be taking us through the final 6 lines of what we just chanted during this morning's service. And I do hope that taking these last several weeks to do a detailed look at this important text, it's been helpful to people in terms of getting a sense of what Dogen's Shikantaza was grounded in. It really was grounded in this teaching of Hongzhi on silent illumination. And it's also my hope that through this, you've gained an understanding of the continuity of this practice going back to the Theravadan tradition, the original teachings of the Buddha, where meditation was kind of seen as being this combination of shamatha and vipassana, which is basically silence and illumination. The silence being concentration. It's part of the Eightfold Path, right? Concentration. That's the silent piece to this. Because in order to concentrate, we have to be still. That's why it's kind of challenging. That's why in a library, for instance, they used to want you to be quiet. That doesn't seem to be quite the case anymore. But I can remember when people would be there to read, and reading is a practice that is best conducted in silence so that one can concentrate, can focus. Otherwise, you end up with the the scenario that we're all familiar with, where you've read a page or two and you finally go, oh my gosh, I don't know what I just read. I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't practicing shamatha here. So you go back and you make a commitment. Okay, this time I'm going to really focus. And sometimes we do, sometimes we get a similar result as the first time through. So that's kind of the silent piece. But sticking to the practice of reading, when we do focus on what we're reading, at the end of our reading practice, we may find that we've become somewhat illuminated about something. It may not be about the true nature of myself and reality. It might be something a little bit smaller. But that's one of the reasons I was drawn to reading, was because I truly did have these illuminations. It might be, since as a young reader, I used to enjoy reading biographies of sports figures. So it might be to become illuminated about Babe Ruth's childhood and life. But, I would come away if I concentrated. And then concentration also generates memory. So I can recollect things. So that we can see just from a simple everyday example like that, the connection between silence and illumination. So those same factors come into play when we're on this spiritual path. To be able to practice in silence, and through that gateway, to be able to connect with illumination, to see things in a different way. So I just wanted to begin, since this is the final talk on the guidepost of silent illumination. I wanted to begin with a general sense of what we've been looking at and the importance of it, and how it does kind of make sense, I think, if we look at it in the context of everyday activities like reading. So let's now dive right in. And beginning with line 31. From the beginning to end, the changing appearances and 10,000 differences share one pattern. And we've been, in the preceding lines, we've been really focusing on this relationship between the relative and the absolute, which I tend to just, in my shorthand, I just call it Sandokai. That's what it is. This is all Sandokai material, the merging of the world of changing appearances and the world of the one pattern that's shared. And in fact, we can get a sense of the difference here just from the way this line is constructed. From the beginning to end, the changing appearances and 10,000 differences share one pattern. Now, especially for the students of Uji here that have been participants in our book discussion group that's been looking at Shinshu Roberts' commentary on Dogen's Uji being time. The sense of the beginning to end. We're now hopefully comfortable with the sense of the emptiness of those terms, which doesn't mean they don't exist, but it means they only exist in their interdependence with everything else. And what that means is that the beginning to end only makes sense in this realm of the changing appearances and 10,000 differences. So that's how we track change, in fact, is in the beginning it was this, and then we follow its progress until it reaches its end point, if it is the sort of thing that has an end point. So changing appearances and 10,000 differences are all about the beginning and the end. And it's only in that context that we can speak of the beginning and the end. I guess I should qualify that. It's only in that realm that we can speak of it with relative ease, relative depending on the situation. You know, the beginning of today's Guardians game against the Braves. We know when that, it will be noted. It'll become part of the statistics of the game, when that game started, when it ended. That's real easy stuff. No challenge. When we get into other things like, well, what is it from an ultimate standpoint? What is the beginning and what is the end in terms of the absolute? This vast Indra's net, the web of interdependence. Then we go, what are you talking about? If we really start to think about that, if we dive into it, there is no beginning or end that we can talk about. We're now talking about a different realm the realm of the changing appearances and 10,000 differences, yeah, it runs straight through them. That's easy. But when we go to that other side of the oneness of all things, when we understand the oneness of all things, things like Joni Mitchell's line from Woodstock, "We are stardust," appropriate for the return of Artemis too. And the moon is part of our planet, just kind of broken off. So we are, and those are obviously just kind of stepping stones to open our minds sufficiently so we can begin to tackle these notions about spirituality, about the whole, rather than our focus on this, that, and the other thing. But what's the purpose of existence? The original metaphysical question: why are there beings rather than nothing? Why is there anything here? Kind of relates to the sense of beginning and end. Why is there anything? So from the beginning to end, the changing appearances and 10,000 differences share one pattern. In other words, saying that the world of the conventional and the world of the absolute are, throughout time and even transcending time, they are interlinked. To share one pattern is saying they are interlinked, because they form one pattern. It's a changing pattern, but it's one. That's the unity of form and emptiness. The form is always changing. But because it's empty, that's why it's one. If things were not empty, then there would just be the myriad things. There'd be no interdependence. Yeah, that would be, we could think of it just intellectually and say, yeah, that would be a weird world. That would be vastly different from the world we live in. And it would be. No interdependence at all. But our world is one of extreme, radical interdependence, through and through. So from the beginning to end, the changing appearances and the 10,000 differences share one pattern. It's just saying everything's interdependent. Is my take on that. So the next line, actually, if I was reading a commentary on this is the line I would go to, even because that's one, it seems to be pointing. It's one of those lines that points to something unique to that period. And it's like, well, I don't know what the hell we're talking about. It was Mr. Ho and Minister Zhang Ru. So I'm here to shed a little bit of light on that in the world of the conventional. And then we'll go from that to see how it's part of this one pattern. So why the hell is Hongzhi talking about Mr. Ho and Minister Zhang Ru and this jade, this piece of jade? Well, Mr. Ho is the legend behind this whole thing. Goes, and actually Shahaku Okimura, I know John has read this book, Okimura's fairly recent translation and commentary on Dogen's Zuimanki. He talks about this. That was the first time I'd seen an account of it. So in the front leaf, I put the page, the section that it was in, because I knew this is something I want to be able to refer back to. And Mr. Ho offering jade, part of this legend involves Mr. Ho thinking he was giving, and it's a different. Actually, no, the emperor that's referred to here, where it says Mr. Ho offered jade to the emperor, it's kind of like an offering of this thing that he considered to be of great value. But the emperor thought it was just a rock, It's like, what are you giving me a rock for? And thought it was kind of disrespectful, actually, and had his I think it was his foot cut off, his punishment. So that's the story behind poor Mr. Ho, who offered jade to the emperor. Be careful if you go bearing gifts. So if you happen to be invited to the White House, you know what kind of gifts Mr. Trump is looking for. Don't hand him a rock, or you might leave less one foot. So that's the story of Mr. Ho, but the story of the jade doesn't end there. A different emperor. So we move forward in time, and he's struck a deal with another ruler to make an exchange for this polished up, really valuable piece of jade for a nice piece of territory, kind of like Greenland, imagine it. So they settled on a price. So Minister Jiang Ru volunteers to conduct this mission. Think of Marco Rubio and say, this is my job. I'll go take care of this. Give me the jade. So he goes, gives the jade, but just has the clear sense that actually this other ruler doesn't intend to reciprocate with the property that had been agreed to. So Jiang Ru, that's why Jiang Ru points to its flaws. He says, oh, this is not the right jade. I need to take this back. So he takes it, and he's allegedly investigating it, I guess, and then he makes off back to his kingdom and his emperor and maps out to him how that all unfolded. So that's the story here about Mr. Ho and Minister Jiang Ru, and how we treat things that seem to have great value. We use it as a matter of exchange, as a matter of gifting. And yet those don't always work in a harmonious way. The gift isn't well received. The exchange, the agreement isn't always honored. So that seems to be pointing to the flaws, we'll say, of these, how we conduct ourselves relative to things in the world, and sharing them with others. So that's leading us then to the next line. Facing changes has its principles. The great function is without striving. And this line has been seen as pointing to the wisdom of accepting and moving with changing circumstances without this ego-driven considerations. Because, again, pointing back to where we started from, all these changing conditions, this is the world that we're daily confronting. This is what we're facing. So we bring our prajna, the wisdom of no self. So these ego-driven struggles that are kind of pointed to by Mr. Ho and Minister Jiang Ru and that saga involving the jade as a gift, as a negotiating tool, that egos all of a sudden have this corrupting influence and dukkha arises. You know, Mr. Ho loses a foot and Jiang Ru's lucky to save the emperor from being duped. So the principle then, because we're saying facing changes has its principles. The principle for our practice and how it relates to silent illumination is to face reality right here in this moment, head on, without any of this interference of conventional views like self, so that we can see things with clarity. And it might help to look at Sandokai, because it has something to say on this subject itself. And I can't help but think that maybe Hongzhi had this in mind when he's writing this. In Sandokai, Shito says, phenomena exist like box and lid joining, this natural harmony of things. Principle accords like arrow points meeting. And of course, we're going to get into the arrow points meeting very shortly in Hongzhi's text. The line that says, our school's affair hits the mark, straight and true. So with that, I become even more convinced Hongzhi's thinking of this particular section of Sandokai. So this fact that phenomena do exist like box and lid joining, and principle accords like arrow points meeting. The fact that the conventional and the absolute come together, always. So to be able to go through life and to go into these stories about Mr. Ho and Minister Jiang Ru with this understanding of harmony and interdependence. So two wise rulers, of course, if there's a deal made, then it's abided by. You know, you could imagine a book titled something like the Tao of Business Deals, and written by Donald Trump. Ha ha ha. That would include this type of story, talking about this is how the world to function harmoniously. This is how things are done. You know, maybe our time has become so jaded. Pardon the this wasn't rehearsed. It just came out. Maybe it's become so jaded that that would just be seen as satire or something. Be like, oh, ha ha. All of us cynics out there would get a great kick out of that. So, and this word principle led me to the my mini Oxford English dictionary to see what its meaning is, and it said that its principal meaning is a fundamental truth serving as the foundation for belief or action. The principles that guide us. So we can then see how facing changes has its principles. Part of our development, our development of prajna, is what principles will guide me in working with all the changes I encounter. How will I do that? So they do teach courses like business ethics. And I've often joked about that. It's an oxymoron. Business has nothing to do with ethics. It's to maximize shareholders' value. Pure and simple. If ethics can be used towards that end, it's great stuff. We love it. We want it. We want more and more of that ethics stuff. But when it stops doing that, not so much. Not so much. So this manner of facing changes has its principles. And the great function is without striving. It kind of has that Taoist flavor to it. The great function is the Tao, the way, which is what Taoism is about. It is the great function. And it's without striving. That's a key point of Taoism. That term that I reference from time to time, Wu Wei, effortless effort, signifies it's without striving. Because we're at one, we're in harmony. So that brings us to the final 3 lines. I'm going to speed it up a little bit. But I think the final 3, we kind of covered the more challenging piece to this, I think. The next line says, the ruler stays in the kingdom. The general goes beyond the frontiers. And it's from one of the commentaries, it's suggested that this line represents the balance between inner stillness and active engagement in the world. So the ruler staying in the kingdom is kind of the sense of the absolute, understanding that aspect of things. But the general going beyond the frontiers is engaging in these actively in these changing conditions. And to see that aspect within each of us. When the labels given to the players in this, a ruler and a general, those are somewhat, I guess for the time they were helpful. It's a different type of society. We might want to change those up. But this sense of staying in the kingdom and going beyond the frontiers let me cast it in terms of practice. To stay in the kingdom is the importance of having, your own individual practice where we practice at home, maybe with a local sangha. But then going beyond the frontiers is, for some of us, I know, certainly speaking autobiographically here, I was traveling beyond I was the general in a lot of instances as well. And this is part of Zen and part of spiritual, regardless of the tradition. People go on pilgrimages, they go beyond the frontiers because they want to experience different teachers. So that's one sense in which, staying in the kingdom and going beyond the frontiers can be taken, which kind of varies a bit from the sense that sees it as kind of this inner stillness and active engagement in the world. But it also has some bearing there. I mean, the inner stillness is that, we just get into a routine of doing it at home every morning. The Zazen practice, for instance. And that becomes kind of inner stillness. I mean, that's just what we do. That's how it fits into our schedule. Whereas the going beyond the frontiers, like the 2-week plus trip I made to China, I see a blurb about it. I go, oh, it's called Following in the Footsteps of Dogen. Oh, I need to go beyond the frontiers here, and go do this, and so forth. I mean, I see that Shahaku's going to be in Pittsburgh. Reb Anderson's going to be in Pittsburgh. I go to Pittsburgh. So there are, in terms of the balance between inner stillness and active engagement in the world, there is an active engagement in the world that occurs in our practice when we engage in the practice. We try to make that something pure, but it's not. I mean, it means getting your hands dirty, literally, sometimes, showing up for work practice or something. And sometimes that work practice might be out in California and might involve moving boulders. Chris and John know what I'm talking about there. That was definitely going beyond my frontiers.
Where's Keith when you need him?
Yeah. The rock mover. But yeah. So there is that aspect even within our practice. So the penultimate line, our school's affair hits the mark straight and true. And this echoes, the arrow points meeting head on. How could it be a matter of skill? In other words, it's happening, it's the Tao, that's the way. These arrow points. So it's not a matter of skill. The archer Yi hit the mark at 100 paces. But when arrow points meet head on, how could that be a matter of skill? So part of this, again, back to silence and illumination, in silence, we can drop off our usual ways of seeing things, the ways that are involved in effort, struggle, accomplishment, attainment, all those terms that we know from Zen teaching. Oh yeah, those are those notions aren't going to help me here on this path. Those are part of what I need to open the hand of thought with and let those go. So silent illumination kind of takes the veil off, the veil of seeing all that as being essential, and rather seeing from a Taoist Zen standpoint this harmonization, so that even when we are inserting ourselves, like in a field such as medicine, to be able to do that, not with Wu Wei, that we're simply in alignment with the natural flow of things. So folk medicine is very much about that, finding the herbs that are just naturally growing and noticing that, oh yeah, they naturally have this kind of quality to them. Now, in our in age after industrialization, we can duplicate those things, but recognizing that really the root is in the natural order, and it's something that we're getting further and further removed from because of our sense of self, and that we don't see that connection. That's what sustains us. Truly, there's no escaping it. It's always present. So we either get on board with it or we experience boatloads of dukkha. But in order to work effectively, if we see things as they are and we work in accord, that's what these last few lines have been about. Work in accord with the nature of things. See things clearly. Practice silent illumination. That's how our school's affair hits this mark straight and true. Sandokai, we see that. The merging of difference and unity. That brings us to the final line. Transmit it to all directions without desiring to gain credit. We have to always insert that because that's kind of the ego coming in, always. Transmit it to all directions. So my giving these talks these past few weeks on this, transmitting it, it's simply the Tao, the way flowing through me, and all that's led to this moment, giving these teachings. So it's important that it gets transmitted. And hopefully I've inserted a bit of that, the sense of that importance in the talk today, how we are really moving so far away from this understanding, this sense. And it's something that I think simply has to get addressed, but without desiring to gain credit. It's about the dharma. The dharma is where the action is. It's not about these conveyors of the dharma. Because I'm simply continuing a teaching And that's what teachers do. This is the role of lineage and traditions. And it's not that any one lineage is better or deficient relative to another. It's simply kind of like the river flowing, so that it has a channel to flow in rather than just, this is the danger of just, not having any tradition, is the water's just kind of overflowing, if there are any banks to begin with. And this way, we're all flowing into the ocean. But we find a stream, just like in a literal sense, my stream's Euclid Creek. And in the spiritual sense, it's the Comanchino lineage of Soto's Inn. So I have two streams. Lucky me. And it's through that vehicle that I attempt to transmit it to all directions, which simply means the course of my life. This, of course, is an important part of it, but not the only part. Everywhere. Under all circumstances, it's important we bring this. So then the question becomes for all students, and I'm also a student too, so I'm not accepted here. For all students, so what will you do with this now that it's been transmitted to you? What will you do with it? Because it's a practice, remember. Not a catechism teacher here teaching you the creed. This is a practice. And that's how it gets transmitted, is through our practice. How we live it. Because it's beyond words, as Bodhidharma expressed it. The father of Zen. It's the teaching beyond words and scriptures. It's our life, the way we live it. Words can be part of it, but it goes beyond that. Has to. Okay, so we made it through. We're now officially done. So let me bow out and invite your thoughts, questions. Glenn.
So going back to, I'm just wondering if there was any kind of, when all of this developed, if there was any kind of reaction to an evangelical strain in other religious practices at the time, because that's one of the things that I've always found interesting and compelling about Zen practice, is that it's not about, this saving of souls. Like, you only gain brownie points if you collect people that you've folded. So I'm wondering, in Buddha's time, if there was other religious practices that had that, and maybe there was a reaction against that, that sort of aggressive, this is the catechism, this is the creed, this is the way that we do things, and you need to get on board.
And one thing I would say in response to that is we also have to keep in mind that it really was a different era back then. So when we look at it, we're kind of thinking in terms of the value of the individual, and in a world where democratic principles have kind of become important. Whereas my sense is back at that point in time, it was more of a political thing. Whereas here now, it is evangelical. You go knocking on doors and you try to get the word out. You get on Facebook and yada yada yada. You're trying to get it out to individuals. Whereas back then it was kind of more hierarchical. So, and that's why the samurai kind of became of an important focal point for the practice of Zen, given their role in the various provinces. However, having said that, it's also my understanding that Soto Zen, while not being evangelical, although it could have been, and when you consider the fact that it did have its growth was more with the general population because of the way it kind of had that democratizing sense to it, that everybody had Buddha nature, was Buddha nature. So you could see where people a little lower in the hierarchy of society at that time would find that to be pretty appealing. Oh, yeah, ultimately, there is no difference between me and the emperor or the samurai or whoever. So I don't know if they were actively evangelizing, but certainly had that kind of impact where it became more popular at the level of the general public. John?
I wonder if you can, and maybe you don't know this, I don't, something I've wondered about for a long time is I have heard a number of times the differences between the Japanese and the Americans during World War II, and how the Japanese were much more focused on the society and your responsibility to it as opposed to individuality.
Right.
I don't know how much of that goes back, or if you can comment on any of that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, and if I have his first name correct, there was a scholar. Last name was definitely Needham. I think it's Joseph Needham, from like the 60s, maybe, who really focused on more Chinese, but East Asian in general, in terms of their holistic view and the impact it had on their civilization versus the, especially in more recent times, the focus on the individual in the Western world. And it's interesting to see, from my perspective, just personally, to see that interplay, that you can take to become just totally the one is kind of like, that sounds like fascism, right? But yet to become just caught up in the individual sounds like our society and all of its ugliness, where it's the individual that you want to focus on. So talking about the middle path, I think the challenge is to find that middle path between those two extremes of the greater whole and the individual. Because we are, in fact, individuals in that conventional sense. I've spoken about that, especially with sentient beings who have consciousness. awareness, because you can't get into somebody else's head and know what their consciousness, what their conscious experience is. It's uniquely private. And that's why we can't. The hard problem of consciousness is, how will we ever give an account of it? And we used to so naively think, oh, that's easy. We just keep studying the brain and the different sections and how neurons are firing, and we'll know. You don't know shit. I mean, I'm sorry. So how do you get from those neurons and those reactions to a conscious state, to being able to hear, a performance of the Shostakovich cello concerto, that the actual sound of it? You have to make that leap. How do you get from the physical trail to the conscious state? And everybody who will be at Severance Hall tonight will hear it privately. Some people may have hearing aids plugged in, and some people will hear it more clearly than others, and so on and so forth. And when they hear it, what it sets off in their mind. Maybe they utilize music as just a means to send them on a trip, so to speak. And maybe they just sit back and go. Another person who's a trained musician might be following mentally the score. All these different ways. And they're all private. And we can't access them. We can use language to try to point to it. But language can't tell you what the Shostakovich cello concerto sounds like. You kind of have to hear it. So you have to incorporate it into your consciousness and get your unique experience of it. So that's Sandokai for sure. We'll have several thousand people there all coming together, hearing the same thing, but everyone uniquely. That's reality. It's beautiful, I think. John?
One of the things along the line of the absolute and the relative, excuse me, the Boucheron said that it was a very simple thing that struck me, that the absolute exists, but if we weren't individuals, I wouldn't have to ask you where it hurts.
Yeah.
And it just, that simple phrase really kind of helped me get a better grasp on it.
Yeah. And even once he tells you where it hurts, you still don't know what that pain.
Yeah.
It'll help you. You can work with it.
It's
So just a practical, yeah. But ultimately, we don't know. We don't know, and we can't. Which is why, like in hospice training, early on, they tell you, don't ever use the term, I know how you feel. You don't. That's a simple truth. So don't go there.
I feel your pain.
You're right. There you have it. Yeah, that's a good way to help somebody who's lost in the ultimate, needs to come back. Yeah. Joe?
I've really enjoyed going through this sutra and picking it apart and and studying it, and I feel like it's taking me so much deeper into our Soto Zen studies, and I like that. And we've done this before in the past, and from time to time you ask for suggestions on any readings and things, but I would
Yeah.
always advocate that we could pick a sutra
Yeah.
and do this.
Yeah.
And we've got an entire sutra book that would be good for a year.
Exactly. And
One after another, just all different
Yeah.
sorts of views from the ancient masters.
yeah. And
And directly in our lineage.
we'll be doing some of that with the Shahaku book we're about to
Mm.
launch into. Some of them very short, like what we're about to chant. I think that comes pretty early on in the book, in fact. So, pretty important 4-line text. It'll probably take us a while to get through. Longer than my 6 lines I knocked off today.
Hey, Dean.
Yeah, Mark.
I just wanted to mention that Ben Connolly is going beyond the frontiers, coming out here to San Diego,
Cool.
and you're all welcome to join. So he's going to be speaking on his book, the Flower Garland Sutra book,
Sure. Yeah.
on Tuesday, April 21st. And it's really easy to access it's Dharma Bum Temple YouTube. So you don't need a password or special link or anything. You just go onto YouTube and type in Dharma Bum Temple.
Okay.
And so it's 7 p.m. on the 21st. So what's that, 10 p.m. your time.
Yeah.
But it's also recorded, so you can,
Okay.
you can view it at a different time.
Okay.
But anyhow, yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
Awesome. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you get a chance to see him. That's great.
Yeah. I'm going to be there in person.
Oh, I figured.
Yeah, I haven't seen him since what was that down at Waterloo area?
Oh yeah, the Pop Life,
Right.
the
Yeah.
yoga studio. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
was
that's
good.
cool. I remember that. Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember you being there.
Yeah. Anyhow, yeah. Thanks.
All right. Let's go ahead and chant out then. May our intention equally penetrate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. Okay, well, we'll be back on Thursday when we're going to wrap up another text too, Ben's book.